Years after the war was declared over, we began traveling the world to record the ones who survived it in their own words before they were gone. The first name on our list took us to Bihar, in northern India, to a town on the Kosi River, to find the doctor who is said to have seen it first. Everyone in the town knew where to send us. Ask at the water tank, they said. Ask for Dr. Meera. She is always near the water tank, near the river. Dr. Meera Anand is 81. She ran the district clinic at Kosi Ghat for 11 years. She still keeps the key to it, though the clinic itself is long gone. She agreed to talk on one condition, that we let her tell it in order. From the beginning, she said, or not at all. The middle is where people lie. Before the war, she was simply the district officer. Vaccinations, snake bites, childbirths, the fevers the monsoon always brought. A small clinic, a large district, and never enough of her to go around. 240 villages spread along the river, she said, and every monsoon the Kosi moved and took a few of them somewhere new. The people here have always lived with a river that will not sit still. The year it began was a bad flood year. The third week of the monsoon, the river took 4 villages in a single night, and the district drowned the way it always does, slowly and then all at once. The relief camps were beyond full, thousands of people up on the embankments and the high roads, waiting for the water to decide whether to give the land back. She barely slept that month, and neither did the river. It was in the third week that a fisherman carried in his sister's son, a boy of 15 she remembers. Fever and a wound on the shoulder, and the man would not stop apologizing, though he had done nothing wrong. A bite, she saw at once, deep and strange. The edges already grey, as if the skin had given up before the boy had. It should have been red and angry. Instead, it was quiet. That quiet, she said, was the first thing that frightened me. She had seen rabies. This was not rabies. The fever climbed past anything a body should hold and keep breathing, and still the boy fought it, hour after hour, long past the point where fighting made any sense. The fisherman told her the boy had been pulled from the flood 2 nights before, half drowned, clutching a body that would not let go of him. They had thought the body was a survivor. They had been kind to it. That, she said, was how it always started, with kindness. At 2 a.m, his heart stopped. She was with him. She closed his eyes, and she filled out the certificate in her own hand, cause of death, fever of unknown origin, and she signed it. She has kept a copy of that page ever since. At 6, the orderly came to move the body, and the cot was empty. The sheet thrown back, the door open. She told herself the family had taken him for the rites. She knew, even as she told herself, that it was not true. She wrote it up and sent it to the district office. A death, a disappearance, a wound she could not explain. It came back stamped and filed under seasonal disease. In a flood year, in a poor district, one more strange fever was not a thing anyone had time to look at twice. Then there were 2 more, then 5. All bitten, all pulled from the flood or from a house where someone had died and not stayed dead. She began to keep them apart. She began to lock the ward. She began, she said, to be afraid of her own patients. She tried to raise the medical college in the city. The lines were down, the roads were water, and the radio carried only the usual monsoon news. She was alone with it, she realized. Whatever it was hers to name, and no one above her was going to help her name it. The largest camp was at the schoolhouse, on the high ground. 400 people. She had sent 2 of the bitten there before she understood, when she still thought isolation meant a separate tent. She has never forgiven herself for those 2. One morning, the smoke from the schoolhouse did not rise. No ration line, no children. 400 people, and the camp simply did not wake up. A boatman brought her the news and would not go back, not for any money. She took 2 police constables in a boat. They were young men, brave enough for a flood, for bandits, for anything they understood. She could see they did not understand this. Neither, she said, did she. But she was the doctor, so she went first. She will not describe what was inside the schoolhouse. She said only that the door was open, and that it was very dark inside for a building with so many windows, and that the two constables went in ahead of her because in the end they were braver than she was. She came out alone. The constables did not come out at all. She poled the boat back by herself in the rain, and she did not look behind her, and she has never told anyone the names of those two men, because their families, she says, deserve a better last chapter than the truth. That night, she burned her clinic, records, samples, the locked ward, all of it. Not to hide it, she says. She wanted a fire big enough that the district office would have to send someone to ask why the doctor had burned down her own clinic in the middle of a flood. Nobody came. It burned all night and into the morning, and the only people who watched were the ones with nowhere else to look. A poor district in a flood year. The dead had always gone uncounted here. She understood, standing in the firelight, that now the uncounted had simply begun to walk. She saw them for the first time in the open the next dusk. A line of people wading across the drowned fields, slow, all in the same direction, none of them speaking, none of them helping the ones who fell. From far away, it looked like a relief column. It was the opposite of one. She learned their rules by watching, because no one was left to teach her. They did not tire, they did not sleep. They followed sound, and they followed the living, and they did not float. When the water was deep, they simply walked along the bottom until it was shallow enough to climb out. That was the first thing she wrote down that saved lives. The dead do not float. They walk the riverbed, so you do not anchor where the water is shallow. You do not trail a rope for them to climb, and after dark, you do not go to the water's edge for anyone who calls to you. Anyone. She stopped waiting for the district office. She loaded a jeep with iodine and diesel and what medicine the fire had spared, and she began to drive the high roads between the villages, teaching the one lesson that mattered to anyone who would stand still long enough to hear it. The bitten do not recover, she told them. There is no fever that passes, no wound that heals. If someone is bitten, you do not wait, and you do not hope, and you do not keep them in the house because you love them. Love, she said, was killing whole families in a single night. They did not all believe her. Why would they? A woman in a burned coat, driving a jeep full of iodine, telling them the dead were walking. In more than one village they turned her away. She kept the jeep running while she talked, she admitted. She had learned that much. But some listened. And the ones who listened did a very old thing, the thing the river had taught them over centuries. They went up. They pulled their boats onto their roofs, drew the ladders up behind them, and made their homes into little islands with the water as a wall. Whole villages lived on their roofs for 2 years. Rainwater in pots, fish from the flood, a boat to move between houses when the sun was high and the water was clear enough to see the bottom. She calls them the roof villages. Most of the survivors of that district lived in one. The rule in a roof village was simple, and it was absolute. The ladder comes up at dusk, and it does not go down again until dawn, for anyone, for any voice, for any reason. She says the children learned it before they learned to read. Some of those children are grandparents now, and they still cannot sleep with a ladder down. News reached them the way water reaches a low field. Slowly, from every direction at once. A shortwave radio in one village, a rumor in the next. Brazil, China, London. The whole world, they began to understand, had its own flood and its own dead walking through it. And some villages did not listen, or listened too late. She keeps their names in a child's school notebook, the kind with a picture of a tiger on the cover. 206 villages. She wrote each one down the day she learned it was gone, so that at least one person would have counted them. She reads the notebook aloud once a year, on the anniversary of the schoolhouse. The whole town comes. It takes most of an evening. She says the counting is not for the dead, who are past caring. It is for the living, who forget so quickly that anyone was ever uncounted at all. The rule that spread beyond her district, the one people now say all over the world. She did not exactly write. It wrote itself on the side of the water tank at Kosi Ghat, where the roof villagers could read it from a mile off across the flood. A schoolteacher's son painted the first line because it was the shortest thing true enough to fit on a water tank. If you can fight, fight. for the ones with a spear or a scythe or the nerve for it. Most people, she said, could not, so he kept painting. If you cannot fight, climb. Go up, pull the ladder after you, live on the roof. And if you cannot climb, float. Get onto the water, into a boat, out to the deep middle where the dead walk the bottom and cannot reach you. 3 lines. 3 ways to still be alive at dawn. He began a 4th line, and he stopped. Nobody remembers what he meant to write or whether he ever knew. He came down the scaffold, and he did not go back up, and the 4th line has been half a letter and a long, empty space on that tank for 40 years. She likes that it is unfinished, she told us. A rule that ends in a blank, she said, is a rule that admits it does not have every answer. If you cannot fight, and cannot climb, and cannot float, sometimes there is a 4th thing, and sometimes there is only the blank. She would not lie to a water tank. The hardest year was the 2nd one. The war, they now know, was at its worst everywhere that year, and here the river rose higher than anyone living had seen. Some roof villages went under. The people moved to the tallest roofs, then to the water tank itself, and waited to find out whether the rain or the dead would reach them first. For 9 days, 100 people lived on the platform of the water tank, under the words, "Above the flood." She was one of them. She says she read the 3 lines 1,000 times in those 9 days, and on the 9th day the rain broke, and the river began, at last, to fall. When the water went down, it left a different district. Fields gone to sand, villages gone entirely, the river running in a new place as if nothing had happened. And on the drying ground, in the mud, the ones who had walked the bottom all that time, slowed and stilled by nothing but the falling of the water. She will not describe the clearing of the mud, only that it was done by the roof villages themselves, with fire, before the district office ever arrived, and that she was there for all of it, because she had asked them to trust her. And trust, she says, is a thing you have to keep paying for. The army came in October, when the river had fallen, and it was no longer an outbreak in a poor district, but a front on a map in the capital. They came with lists and rifles, and a young officer who asked her, quite seriously, whether the situation was under control. She pointed at the water tank. "Read that," she told him, "and then ask me again whether it is under control." He read it. He was quiet for a while. Then he asked her to come with them and teach the other districts the 3 lines. She did. That is how the words left the Kosi. She spent the last 2 years of the war on that jeep, driving from district to district, painting 3 lines on water tanks and boat hulls and army trucks. By the end, she would arrive in a village and find the words already there, arrived ahead of her, and no one able to say from where. Victory, when it was declared, did not feel like victory here. It felt like a flood finally going down. One morning, the ladders came down and stayed down, and the boats went back into the water, and a woman lit a cooking fire on the ground, in the open, for the first time in 2 years, and wept over it. We had been listening for a long time when she reached the end. She poured fresh tea, though ours was untouched, and she looked out at the river for a while, the way she must have looked at it 10,000 times, and she let the quiet sit. We asked the question everyone asks her. Did she consider herself a hero? She laughed, the small laugh of someone who has been asked too often. "I was a doctor," she said, "who signed a death certificate that turned out to be wrong. Everything I did after that was only correcting my paperwork." She keeps the key, she told us, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. A door she locked too late. A ward she should have burned sooner. A rule she wrote one death after she should have written it. "Heroes," she said, "do not keep the key to their worst night. Doctors do." Only once did her voice change. When we passed a small photograph on the wall, 2 young men in police uniform, a garland over the frame. She did not tell us their names. She said only that they went into the schoolhouse ahead of her, and that a garland is the least a district can owe 2 men whose families were told they drowned. 11,000 people are alive on the Kosi today, in the roof villages and the rebuilt towns, who can tell you her name. Most of them cannot tell you the name of a single one of the 206 villages in her notebook. She thinks that is exactly as it should be. The living should crowd out the dead. That is the whole point of surviving. The children learn the 3 lines in school now, the way children once learned prayers. If you can fight, fight. If you cannot fight, climb. If you cannot climb, float. They learn them as history, as safety, as a rhyme. They do not know a woman in a burned coat drove a jeep for 2 years to bring the words to their grandparents. She goes to hear them sometimes, she said, and stands in the doorway where they cannot see her and listens to her worst 2 years turned into a children's rhyme, and she is glad. A thing that becomes a rhyme, she said, is a thing that will outlive the ones who bled for it. That is the only kind of forever a doctor believes in. Every year, before the monsoon, before the river rises, the town repaints the water tank. Fresh white, then the 3 lines again, tall as a man, in the same place. They repaint it so the roof villages upriver can still read it across the water when the flood comes. They have never once flooded since. They repaint it anyway, and every year they leave the 4th line blank. The painter's brush comes to the empty space and stops and comes down. Nobody has ever tried to finish it. She was asked once by a young official whether she would like to write the ending herself now that the war is won. She said no. The blank is the truest line on the tank, she told him. If you cannot fight and cannot climb and cannot float. She has buried enough people who reach that 4th line to know that sometimes there is no 4th thing, only the ones left behind, learning to leave it blank and go on. We thanked her and left her by the window, an old woman with a key to a clinic that no longer exists, in a town that is alive because she was wrong once and spent the rest of her life being right, out loud, to anyone who would stand still and listen. This has been the first testimony in the Wanderer's Chronicles. There are many more, from every drowned and frozen and burning corner of the world the war touched. We intend to record everyone we can still reach, because the dead were uncounted once, and the living forget so quickly. If you can fight, fight. If you cannot fight, climb. If you cannot climb, float. And the last line, as she would want it, left exactly as it is.